Which build is better for newbies of Last Epoch, a wonderful Path of Exile clone game that I'm quite enjoying between Path of Exile seasons. So while I'm still enjoying it, I thought I'm going to put together this little video for newbies of Last Epoch and talk to them about two of the most arguably famous and popular builds, melee builds specifically. We will start with Flurry Bladedancer. It is basically a rogue. It is a classic, very enjoyable, fast-paced gameplay style in many games, I suppose, in many ARPGs, and Last Epoch is not an exception. While in Path of Exile we have Ranger class that normally prefers bows and ranged attacks, obviously. In this particular case, your ranged gameplay and melee gameplay is all kind of bound to this rogue class, because Last Epoch is simplified version of anything else that you've seen before. It's closer to Diablo as far as the design of the classes is concerned than Path of Exile, which is very complex. So in this particular case, we are specializing or ascending, so to speak, if you're familiar more with Path of Exile terminology, as a blade dancer. And we are not going for marksmanship, we're not going for bows, we're not going for any ranged attacks. We are essentially playing around with the skill that you get, the very first skill that you get, Flurry. Flurry is fantastic in itself. It gives you quite a bit of a bang for your buck straight away. It's super enjoyable to use, makes you feel powerful straight away, which I can't say about many other classes other than Warpath Paladin. We will talk about that in a minute. I think from the non-expert beginner kind of attitude and beginner approach that we take to the game, at least on my channel, I think it's super important to feel like you are gratified or you're having fun pretty quickly. That you don't have to invest hours and hours and hours of gameplay before you start enjoying yourself. What do you think about that? So let me know in the comments down below if you share these opinions with me. So in this particular case, Flurry is that staple ability that makes your rogue feel super powerful. It is scaling very nicely with the scaling tags that are clearly told to us by the game UI as physical damage, melee damage, and dexterity. The unique thing about Last Epoch is that other than just your build, other than just how you spend your leveling points in your passive skill tree equivalent, there are also specializations of skills. So it's not just how you build your character and your class, but it's also about the fact that you can specialize in a few skills. You specialize in Flurry. This version of the build that I'm playing with and got up to level 30, I know it's very low in the game, but it's still enough to get a taste for it, is specializing in poisons, in spreading poisons. So my two main abilities are shurikens, which I am specializing to circle around me and penetrate the targets without being expended, so that they continue circling around me like a shield and continue inflicting damage to enemies without being expended as I run into the enemies, as well as spreading poison. So that's very important. So Flurry doesn't just hit the enemies very fast like Shredder from Ninja Turtles, but it also poisons the enemies. It does a massive amount of damage, once again, when you use your movement ability Shift, which is basically a dash forward, so to speak. You can specialize Shift as well to make sure that it drops one of the poisonous vials, acid flasks as they're called here in this game, upon departure and upon arrival. So as you start shifting or dashing, you drop a poisonous flask around yourself and poison everything around you, and then upon arrival it drops another flask. This is not a full review of the build, just a couple of things to highlight here. To sort of, what I'm trying to say to you here is that it is a very fun build, and you start feeling fun and you start feeling powerful as a rogue, as a blade dancer, very early on. By level 30 you kind of have all your main toys, and not fully specialized obviously, and a lot is still remains to be desired in terms of survivability of this build and other kind of things. That's why it's not a full-blown guide, but at the same time, that, I suppose, if you're looking for a sale on a rogue within Last Epoch, if you want to try that class, if you play rogues in other games, I reckon you will not be massively disappointed. I think it's very powerful. There is a good case to put forward for rogues and specifically blade dancers. That's what talks about that. Now let's switch gears and talk about the Sentinel Paladin Ascendancy class, which again I explained to you how ascendancy classes work here in Last Epoch compared to Path of Exile. Sentinel is a sturdy, basically warrior, base kind of model, kind of base class, and you can become Void Knight, Forge Guard, and Paladin. I have a different video that's showcasing my really wonderful and well-performing in the end game Void Knight. That basically is an auto bomber build. It's fantastic, and I'm not comparing these two builds, these two classes, ascendancy classes today in this video to Void Knight, because Void Knight, for better or for worse, it's mostly a spell damaging class. Becomes a spell damaging class, even though it runs around with a massive two-handed sword. But today we're talking specifically about melee damage builds, right? So what is so special about Paladin? Well, Paladin is a holy warrior, and in this particular case we're focusing on converting physical damage to fire. And same as with the Rogue Bladedancer, luckily for Paladin, Paladin gets its most useful, most gratifying ability pretty much immediately straight away as they level up in a completely newbie zone, like level 4 or something. You get Warpath. Warpath is exactly that staple ability where you spin to win. It's exactly the same as Cyclone in Path of Exile. It's exactly the same as Whirlwind in the Whirlwind Barbarian context of Diablo 3. So Warpath is fantastic. You're spinning as you're moving around. It can be specialized, as I explained to you how specializations of skills work here. It can be specialized in such a wonderful way that you don't spend any mana as you spin. It's free. Can you imagine that? So channeling cost of this skill becomes nothing if you specialize it properly and you invest 5 points into Unchained. Beyond that, what I've done is I've invested into converting as much possible, kind of as many points into making sure that any bleed sources that are default kind of damage that's associated with the Warpath, they get converted to ignition, to ignite. And the effects related to bleed now depend on ignite instead, and basically we turn into fire. Another wonderful ability that Paladin class gets, and Sentinel class gets as well, is Smite. Smite is like this fire from heavens shot from above. Well, the design of the game allows us to sort of create really simple and really effective synergies between the key abilities, such as Smite and Warpath in this particular case. For example, Smite can be procced by Warpath every second. That's what I invested points into here. Winds of Justice, not Wings of Justice, apologies. While spinning, you have a chance to cast Smite each second on a nearby enemy. This does consume Smite's mana cost, but it's still very much worth your while and very much worth the mana spent. In my opinion, as fun as Rogue Bladedancer is and as gratifying as the Flurry ability is, poisoning everything and basically deleting everything very quickly with this series of really fast hits, I think for a complete newbie who doesn't know the game, it certainly would not take you as long to get the gist of what you need to do and what you not need to do in this game compared to Path of Exile. I still think that for a complete newbie, the Warpath builds, especially the ignition-based Warpath builds, rather than something complex with the bleed effects in mind, wins, in my opinion, in my view. I think that it is a lot more beginner-friendly. It is much easier to navigate. You do not need to worry about shurikens, you don't need to worry about much, in all honesty, other than just keeping your one finger on the button that is your Warpath mapped button constantly pressed and just keep spinning to win. That's basically it. You will kill everything, you do not need to do anything else. If I may say, it might become a tiny bit boring at times, but overall it's a great animation, especially when it's converted, the damage is converted to fire. Occasionally you will use the lunge, which is the Paladin's version of dash, except it's inferior to dash or to shift ability from the Rogue class, in my opinion, simply because it requires a target. Shift does not require a target. You can just use it as mobility ability. You can just move yourself forward as you dodging the boss attacks, as you just moving through space. Lunge needs a target for you to lunge at. That is the main difference and where I think it's inferior. However, with all this inferiority, with maybe a little bit being a bit more boring than Rogue Bladedancer, I still overall think that for newbies, if you're looking for your first class, most simplistic basic build in Last Epoch that's going to take you to the end game, you could either go with a completely different build, which is the Void-based Void Knight Auto Bomber build. Yep, separate videos, separate instructions, separate build guide. Or you can just do something similar to what I've demonstrated to you here today and go with the classic Warpath Paladin and convert all your damage to fire and burn everything as you spin around. Hope you enjoyed this little overview, spontaneous, off-the-cuff little video. If you like these videos, please subscribe to the channel for more casual guides and advice, and like the video as well. And I'll be speaking with you very, very soon, probably as soon as the 317 League of Path of Exile is revealed. Can't wait, very much looking forward to this, to make plans, to create new builds, see what happens there. Thanks very much for tuning in today, talk to you soon, bye for now.